You know, Zhuangzi, who's one of my favorite philosophers of all time. Zhuangzi, for those who are not familiar, the spelling is kind of peculiar. It's spelled in a couple different ways. You can spell it Chuang, Tz or Su, Chuangzi, or you can spell it with a Z like Zhuangzi. Chinese is very strange when you start to translate it into English. But in any case, Zhuangzi was a contemporary of Lao Tzu who people are a little bit more familiar with. And Lao Tzu, as you all may know, wrote the Tao Te Ching. And the Tao Te Ching is a book on, you could describe it in several different ways. I like to call it the book about water. It is how would water act if water was a person, and if you are a person, how would you act if you were water? And the Tao Te Ching is a treatise on life, on the spirit. It can be a treatise on politics, on behavior. It can be applied to a lot of different things. But I think it's clear that its main principal usage is spiritual, and more precisely spiritual liberation. Now, Lao Tzu was a very old fellow. I believe Lao Tzu can be translated as old man, and he's often depicted as having all white hair, you know, the very typical saintly, wizardly fellow, very kind of hermity, small, statured man. That was Lao Tzu. Well, apparently there was another fellow called Zhuangzi, which was either during the time of Lao Tzu or after it. I believe it was after. You know, it's really hard with these things to know. First of all, we don't even know if Lao Tzu really existed. There's really no clear evidence that he did. It may be possible that just like the Bible, it's a conglomerate of several different stories from a lot of different sources. But maybe he did exist. In any case, after Lao Tzu's time, there was Zhuangzi. I'm prefacing that because we don't even know Zhuangzi existed either, but I'm sure he did. At least he did in spirit. And Zhuangzi was a younger fellow, and he was, whereas Lao Tzu was very kind of orderly, not Confucian in the sense, but very proper, you know, he's done it all, he's seen it all, he's like, okay. Well, Zhuangzi is still kind of younger and a little bit still vital and exploratory and unabashed in spirit. I just suppose the normal vigors of youth, you know, a little bit more expressive. He was more of an expoundant of what's called a crazy wisdom, which happened to fall exactly still in line with the Taoist principles. That's why he was a contemporary of Lao Tzu, is because he was the same expression as Lao Tzu, but in a very radically different way. Now, in that crazy wisdom, Zhuangzi had a real element of humor, and it really comes across in his writings, which are a lot of times a little bit different than Lao Tzu's, and are sometimes quite, honestly, they're difficult to understand sometimes. You know, even if you're very poetically minded, but you really have to really dig into the meaning, because the thing is that when you're translating from Chinese, these kinds of languages, they can be interpreted in multiple different ways, and because of cultural differences, sometimes those interpretations can be not quite accurate, or even your own interpretations, you might not have the proper reference points to understand properly. So it's a very, very peculiar kind of philosophy, and I think Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching is more approachable and understandable, but Zhuangzi was an interesting fellow, and one of his quotes that I loved, I'm going to paraphrase here, I don't know it word for word, but it was when you're out to get something, okay, it's, you know, the subject is archery, right? And it talks about a brass ring, right? If you hit that bullseye right on target, then you win a brass ring. So Zhuangzi was talking about that, and he says, no brass ring, no prize, if you play, you're going to hit that bullseye. It doesn't matter if you win or lose, you just do it for the sake of doing it. Hit the bullseye, you got it. You're at one, you're in the Tao, you're flowing, you're present, you're here now, you got it. Now add that brass ring to the mix. What happens? Something different happens. Now you're thinking about the brass ring. You're not here anymore. You're going to miss the bullseye. Or you might not miss it, but you're going to fall. You're not going to hit dead center. You're not going to be authentic and true to yourself. Not true to your action, basically. You might be true to whatever it is, energy that you're following, but you're not true to the actual action that you're performing. So you're out of alignment. You're not in what the Taoists called wu wei, or action to non-action, because you're preoccupied with something else. So that's kind of a metaphor, I think, for life. It's not just when we're after a prize, we tend to get quite blindsided, and it really is a metaphor for life because of the way we chase after things, because we do things very often not for their own sake, but first, here's the main point. Most of the time we don't do things for their own sake, and therefore a lot of our work is, quite honestly, a bit sloppy. And this happens because it's not that we can't put effort or value, we put effort into it. What's lacking is presence, I suppose, presence of spirit. And the attitude isn't quite as good as it can be optimally, and here's why. If we're constantly doing things while thinking of the results that it's going to get, or thinking of the next thing we're going to do after we're doing this thing, we're not here. So we're not going to perform whatever we're doing, first of all, in the best way possible. We're not going to be present with it, so we're going to be partially disconnected with it. That automatically means that you're not applying your full potential to it. And thirdly, you're not evolving with it. You're removing yourself from the process of whatever you're doing, so it becomes mechanical. It becomes void of soul and spirit. It doesn't mean it always does. There's really a percentage kind of thing. I mean, it's not black and white. You're either there or you're not. But it's something that's good to be aware of. I think it's something that increasingly people are becoming aware of in this culture. And the question is, what do we do about it? Because these forces are so strong. And the forces of habit and momentum and karma are so strong that we're kind of immersed in our old habits of mind. Habits of mind is the important key, because most of us are having the most difficulties with habits of mind. It's one thing to change your behavior, and that's simple enough. The parameters are really easy. You either do it or you don't. In some cases, all you got to do is stop doing something or start doing something, so it's not extremely complicated. When it comes to the realm of your mind, things become a little bit more subtle and difficult, because it's hard to know exactly what processes are going on in your mind at all times. This is something that meditation and yoga is extremely useful with, by the way. But some of these processes, even if we're talking to people, even if we're seeing a therapist, we might never notice. They might never notice. These are the psychic, energetic blind spots, and they come out of the machinery, the circuitry of your mind and your neurology. And pretty much the only way you can actually, not the only way, but I say one of the best ways is really through meditation and yoga, through still introspection, is to stop that hustle and bustle of movement, sit, center yourself, and pay attention, observe what is going on within yourself. Now, what's going to happen is, when you do that, is you tone things down, you relax. Most of us have never taken the time to do this, so I would take 1 to 5 minutes. It really is all it takes to, the more the better, of course, but 1 to 5 minutes per day minimum is so essential, just to come back to yourself, at the very least, to integrate back into yourself. Because what happens is, in normal everyday life, is we accumulate an incredible amount of tension and experience and information. What that does is it amplifies and spikes our nervous system which has a tendency to stay spiked. See what happens? It's really overwhelmed in some sense. We're very much, a lot of us, easily overwhelmed and stressed on many different levels, mentally, emotionally, physically, but it's especially the first two, the mental and emotional parts, especially emotionally. I mean, emotionally, it's incredibly interconnected. But when you sit down, you relax, you take a few minutes, you breathe, and you just let things settle down, because if you don't, it's very, very hard to examine what's actually going on in yourself. If you have 5 to 10 to 100 layers of stuff going on, I'm doing this, you see what I'm doing with my hands, I'm doing this metaphorically, but it's not so metaphorical, because you have something called mental energy, you have something called emotions, and you have something called the aura and the auric field. Now, thought is a very complicated thing, but your brain has, as we know, a role to play in thought. So your brain waves change in relation to your state of consciousness. That's why I'm doing this. I'm trying to gesture an analogy here. And when you have a lot of stress, you're very much in the high, I really don't want to get into scientific terms, but the high beta, that means it's oscillating fast, and it's dense, it's not relaxed, it's not smooth, it's very hard. And in the realm of brain waves, in any case, the more you relax, the more you lower them, the more you can, it's interesting, really, visually it makes sense. Even if you look at the structure of a sound wave, when you lower the frequency of the sound wave, there's a wider space between each peak. That gives you more space. That's a good analogy. I didn't really ever think about it that way. It gives you more space. That's what you want. That's what you're looking for in your meditation practice. You're looking for that inner space. Now, the really cool thing about that inner space is that actually is as much you as what you think you are. That emptiness, that voidness, that nothingness between all things is you. Now, it might be a really weird concept to grasp, because how can you be nothing? How can you be not you? Well, it'll be for another video. But for now, let's keep using that metaphor of emptiness. By the way, emptiness, that voidness, is a fundamental concept in Buddhism. It is literally the whole point of meditation, aside from compassion. Compassion is another really key, important element. But the fundamental basis of all meditation is emptiness, is voidness, is nothingness. It is to find that center, that fulcrum of experience that is beyond the conscious thought, beyond the discursive, analytical mind. One way of viewing this, which I don't think it's exact, but it works, is that all that is, ever was, and will ever be, including the void and empty space, is your unconscious mind. Why? Because your unconscious mind is the repository of mental experience that you're not actually experiencing right now, but could be, but can't, because you can only experience one stream of thought at a time. It's inconceivable that you're going to think all thoughts at the same time. So it has to kind of funnel in out of that vast sea, out of this vast sea of all that is and ever was and will ever be, including the void space and emptiness out of which all that manifestation arises. While you can only experience it a little bit at a time, because of the way time works, you can only experience it in a somewhat linear fashion. So that funnels in, and that funnels into each and every human being, and that's what constitutes our mind. Now, from the Eastern point of view, what they say is that there is only one mind. Call it the universal mind, call it God, which I think is a bit of a overused word, so you can call it God. But the one mind, call it the mind of God, I suppose. And we all have that same mind. It's literally the same mind. Get that? It's not different minds split apart. It's the same mind that's funneling into us each individually, not just people, but all and everything, like all creatures, all beings. But for human beings, since we share a common biology, it's going to be something that's common to people. Each species has a frequency that's common to them, and then all of that interrelates and is interconnected. these are not actual distinctions. I'm only making them for for practical purposes. These, because it's all one process. There's not actually any separation between any kind of different creature, biological or non-biological, alive or not. So that one consciousness funnels in, and that can be said to be the unconscious mind fundamentally. If you really analyze this critically, there's really not much difference between the one mind and the unconscious mind. And when you meditate, you tone that level of activity. So you have several layers. You're stuck here. You got these layers. So your perspective is within this. So it's very hard to just step out and see things from another perspective. So there's a lot of ways of dealing with this. There's a lot of ways to work with this, depending on what method you use. From the point of view of yoga and meditation, especially from the point of view of dissolving meditation, the water method of Taoism, which the whole philosophy of Lao Tzu and the Tao Te Ching expands, is that you dissolve, you release, you let go. And we talk about this in another segment where we look at the mechanics of meditation, but it has a downward flowing component to it, just like water. It flows down. And that downward movement is very, very important in energetic practice, and it's something that's actually quite a bit neglected in favor for the upward ascending cycle. That's really characterized by the Kundalini and very much favored by our culture in general, which always wants to get higher, 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 ascend, up to heaven, up to heaven. It's kind of obsessive in a sense, and it's actually counterproductive because, as Carl Jung and Nietzsche said, the higher your branches go up into heaven, the farther down into the soil your roots go, which is another way of saying to hell. And so if you're out of touch with that, you're going to run into some problems. Now, that metaphor is not exactly the same as the water method and the downward flow, because, hell is a concept. Let's say earth. Let's say earthy things. In fact, I think, hell is a concept that really came from the Judeo-Christian point of view, Christianity. You have hells in Buddhism and Taoism, ideas, concepts like hell, but you don't have anything like the Christian hell, which is an everlasting place where people go to get punished. The conception of hell and demons from the Eastern perspective is nothing like that. It has some resemblances, but the whole cosmic worldview is so different, and I'm going to get into that another time. Let's get back to the meditation. You're dissolving, so you're through the method, you're releasing these layers, you're neutralizing them by calming them down and releasing them. When you do this, by the way, this is not bypassing, this is not escaping, this is not repressing, this is curing. This is literally the process of how to cure trauma and how to heal trauma and how to heal. I say trauma, but trauma is just one aspect, one expression of this tension. Fundamentally, it is stuck energy. It's a blockage of some kind. And when you dissolve that, you soften it, you release it, and that process reconditions your nervous system. It's not a process of hypnosis. It's not a process of addition or transformation. It really is a process of complete release, letting go, and dissolution. This is what happens when you die. And the less prepared you are for it, the more you're going to have a bad time when you die. The better you are prepared for it, the better time you're going to have when you die. The better time you're going to have after you're gone. Your transition is going to be a lot smoother. For another video again. So, it's something that's good to learn in this life. People, there's so many ways to invest your life. What do you want to do? Do you want to go out and acquire material and worldly wealth and possessions? You can certainly do that. There can be quite a bit of value in that as well. But you can also look at what is life, what is existence at all, and then start to figure out what is actually worth doing, what isn't. one of the things I figured out in my life, I was lucky to figure this out fairly early on, though, not that early, was that it's worth investing into your inner world. It is worth understanding your inner world, it's worth getting in touch with it, and making friends with it. As so many times we will be coming back to this fundamental principle of Socrates, which is know thyself. Knowing thyself is not just knowing what beliefs one has, not just knowing what beliefs one thinks one has, it's also knowing yourself from a neurological point of view. This is what I like to call the yogic point of view, where you have psychology within your biology, which cannot be handled or dealt with appropriately with conscious and aware thought and discourse. However, massive, sometimes complete healing and transformation can take place on a solely verbal level. So I'm not discounting it. What I'm saying is that if your goal is to reach into the deepest recesses of your soul and your psyche, it's very hard to do it without meditation. That's really a tall statement to make, saying that meditation is fundamental. But it really is. If you don't get past these several layers, how will you ever see what's going on beyond that? You will live inside of that. You might think we're in the very center of your being, but you're in that. Now, the funny thing is that it's very doubtful whether there is an actual center. It seems that life is more like a layer after layer after layer, and God or infinity is an asymptote. You never quite reach it. You get damn close to it. So it's like if for those that know math, my math is very bad, but the asymptote is a line, I believe it's called a limit, where you get increasingly close to it, but you never reach it. You just never touch it. It's the same as like a veil, as God. You can't pierce it unless you die. When you die, you go on the other side, and the journey goes on. It's just one example, but that's the thing. So we're kind of similar. We're layer after layer after layer like that. And while we can penetrate to a certain center, there is a kind of center that is the void space out of which all phenomena arise. But in the realm of manifestation, there doesn't seem to be a manifest center. I think back to one of my ayahuasca ceremonies that I did quite a while ago, and that was my intention before ceremony. I wanted to know, what's my true face? Like, I know I wear masks, I know I put on an act, well aware of that. I know I can be honest with myself. So what is my face? What was my face before I ever put on my first mask? What was that like? What is it? And I went in, and I looked, and I peeled back layer after layer after layer, and all I could really find was a kind of a hard to define. It was a kind of a gesture, a kind of a, but not quite. You see, that's already too complicated. It was, what I found was, it was really kind of like just the spark of life itself, and I couldn't define it. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't break it down to any fundamental constituents. It couldn't tell me what I should be, what I need to be. It was this curiosity, this perplexion, and kind of, I don't know how to define it. It's just this movement, just it's life itself. But you'll be hard pressed to say what it really is, or what intrinsic qualities that it really has. So you're going to get closer and closer and closer to your true and authentic self. You can never really reach it for a number of reasons. But let's put that aside for a moment and come back to meditation, because that's not quite the point of meditation. Not really. What you want to be doing is you want to be releasing all concepts. So while I'm describing this using words, and I'm talking about layers and peeling things back and all that, the whole point of meditation is to get beyond that. Metaphors and examples are really good to explain things, but in meditation, you're precisely moving beyond the mind. So layer after layer after layer, you can dissolve those things, and those layers of mind activity, once they're very still, you reach a place that is non-verbal, and it's kind of uh, like a rocket, like a propulsion system. You kind of get into the muck, and then you're in, and you pierced in that membrane, and now it's such an interesting metaphor. Now you're in, and you're like swimming inside yourself, and it's very calm, and it's very quiet, and it's very tranquil. So you're like a pro, you're like a scout. You're like, okay, oh sweet, now oh my god, is that the tiling I'm using? I put up what kind of plaster material? What's going on here? And then the work begins, because then you're like, oh shoot, okay. Well, that puts you in a really, really good position, because then you know what to work on. That's the whole point. The art and the science of yoga is you can start to work these things out, starting with your mind, starting by understanding how your mind works. You can really literally tap into the circuitry of your thoughts and your mind, and how it connects to your emotions, the filaments of your nervous system down to the most minute core, depending on how dedicated you are to this. Now you might be asking yourself, what's the point of this? Does that make you like not human? No, it actually makes you utterly human. It gets you in touch with the way you were before you were sullied by conditioning. I'm sorry for that harsh word. It's true. Conditioning stains us. Not in, oh, it's not nice, not pretty stain. It stains us in the sense that it obscures our sight and our vision. We may be utterly aesthetically perfect. It doesn't mean that we see things completely clearly, and we never can. I would say it's impossible to see things clearly. You can't, but just by virtue of being a human, you already have a filtering mechanism. Remember that little funnel I was talking about earlier? Well, the funnel is your biology, is your expression, your energetic ability to transform that energy, receive it, transform it, and output it again. So in meditation, it's really a matter of ceasing or understanding mind activity. Now, whether mind activity can stop altogether is, I think, a hotly debated topic in meditation, or whether it's even desirable or not. I posit that you can stop your mind. You definitely can. The usefulness of that varies. There are different things you can do with that. And it's trainable. It's just like a muscle. It's just like attention. People talk about ADD. It's like, dude, you don't have a disease. It's because you haven't trained your attention muscle. If you never worked out your ability to pay attention, how do you expect to get better at paying attention? You get better at what you practice at. So attention can be practiced. Sustained attention, something that our culture nowadays is sorely lacking in this information age, and people aren't to blame. Culture is literally designed to sap away the ability to have focused and sustained attention, but it can be worked. You can focus on that. Parallel to that focused attention is the ability to stop all verbal discourse, to stop your thoughts, not in a forceful kind of way. In the beginning, when you're practicing, it can appear that way, but eventually you can. It's like a muscle, no thought. Now you drop down. Here's a visual metaphor. You're like thought. You're thinking. You're like, okay, I'm gonna stop thinking. Stop thinking. Mind activity slows down. Awareness remains. You don't disappear. A lot of people think, oh, if I stop thinking, I'm just going to disappear and I'm going to become unaware and unconscious and fall asleep. No, I mean, you could certainly fall asleep if you wanted to, but that's not what happens. When you stop thinking, you're actually more aware of yourself in reality, because your mind is focused on all those thoughts. So you stop thinking, your awareness drops down into your body, so your mind returns to your body where it belongs. And it goes down, and you become progressively more aware. You're not thinking about anything, you're just watching, you're observing. Now that awareness is parallel with feeling. So everything that you're aware of, you feel. In fact, that's the only real way to do it, is to feel it out, not visualize it. There's a visual component in the beginning, which helps you, but ultimately, the way in and out, the whole process is done through feeling. Do you feel it? what you can't. There's a saying that says you can't heal what you can't feel. It's very true. So you reconnect to that. You reconnect to the nerves. You figure out what's going on inside your body, your entire body. That begins the process of exploration. That is the great alchemical work. It's tied into psychology. It's a field that's vast. There's just so much to say about what actually happens when you start doing that. But that's a topic for another video. And I hope you enjoyed this. There's a lot more to come. And I wish you a fantastic day. Much love. And until next time. Thank you.